Flight attendants have changed significantly over the years. One particular airline, United, has a very interesting change of fashion. It changes from being quite modest and uniform to more unique and commercial. The first record of a flight attendant serving with United was Ellen Church from Iowa. The magazine Wired reports that Church, a registered nurse from Iowa, was so enamored of flying that she became a certified pilot. She approached BAT, the forerunner of United Airlines, looking for a pilot's job, a futile hope for women in those days. But the BAT executive did like Church's other suggestion that commercial airliners carry nurses on board. As a result, the first flight attendants were intended to help people who were sick or needed help with the initial shock of being thousands of feet above the earth. As you can see in this picture, her uniform is quite modest in the sense that it isn't revealing much. She has a long skirt that goes below the knees and that is loose. She appears to be wearing a beret and a nurse's cape that goes over her suit. This costume is similar to the nurse's uniform worn during that age. She also has a tight-fitting suit that causes her to almost become gender neutral. Her shoes are classic pumps, which makes her seem taller than she really is. This next photograph is taken in 1968. There is a significant difference in the uniform. The uniform is a dress skirt that is tight and form-fitted with long stripe down the middle. They also are wearing a tall and wide cap that matches their dress. The uniforms in the 1980s were quite different because the business of flying became more commercial, and so the flight attendants had to have uniforms more like business suits. The men had a suit and tuxedo with a striped tie. The shoes were leather. The women had a suit with a tuxedo and a scarf. They also had miniskirts or pants depending on the person. The newest uniforms, released in early 2013, have changed quite a bit because there are different clothing styles for different roles. The women wear high heels, pants, or skirt with a suit coat and a colorful scarf. The men have a sweater or suit, pants, and dress shoes. The progression of uniforms shows fashion as a commodity because in the first photograph, the flight attendant is wearing really fancy extravagant clothing, but it's also practical. There are a lot of layers, and the fabric is quite unique. The color is dark green, but because the photograph is in black and white, you can't really tell. The pump shoes seem to be basic, but also showing somewhat extravagance. The second stage in 1968 is a little different because the style is different. People are becoming more interested in flying, and it was geared more towards people who went on vacations. As a result, the flight attendants were dressed like they were going to have a good time. There was less layers, and they showed off more skin. It also appeared to be difficult to walk because of how tight the dresses were. Most people saw flying as exotic, and as a result, the flight attendants tended to dress more exotically, thus marketing it to customers. The third stage in the early 80s is quite different because now that the prices of flights dropped, more people use it. This also restricted the clothing of the flight attendants because anyone could fly, not just the super rich. This caused an increase in customers and an increase in flight attendants. With the increase in demand for flight attendants, the uniforms became more structured and similar. There wasn't much variety because of the mass production. The colors of the suits became basic, simple, and unoriginal. The shoes became more standardized and industrial, as seen in this image. The newest change in uniforms in 2013 showed even more mass production and the downgrade in quality of uniform. The fashion designer of this group of uniforms quit before it was released because she refused to put her name on the fabric they used. This caused distaste in the uniforms because of the mass production of the uniforms. The shoes are very mass produced and look very unusual. The suit is a standard design, and there isn't very much that sets the uniform apart from the boring business suit. Fashion as a political and social distinction is evident in the progression, in that, in the original photograph, the flight attendant was part of a class that was patriotic. This is because her clothing is green, showing the colors similar to the military uniform of the day. It also showed similarities to the nursing classes of the day. Thus, it crossed borders in expressing a certain class. In 1968, the uniform showed a certain high class, because during that time only the rich were able to purchase tickets. It presented a class that was exotic and exciting to the rich. The uniform is more dreamlike and luxurious. This is evident in the red colors of the dresses and the tightness of it. The fact that the dress shows more skin than the first shows not only a change in views of fashion, but also in the customers. In the early 80s, flying became more common, and thus lost its excitement and exotic feel. The industry became more of a business, and thus the uniforms resembled more businesslike. Both the male and female flight attendants in this picture are wearing formal business suits and pants. The woman on the left, however, is an exception because she is a little less businesslike with her dress. In the newest edition of the uniform, the industry viewed as a business has almost completely taken over. The men have overcoats that are quite fancy and businesslike. The women, however, show a different kind of class, which shows more of their body. This might be because of the culture and what people define as a business dress. Fashion as a projection of the ideal self is shown in the progression because in the original photograph from 1930, the pomp heels that she wears accentuate the areas that trigger erotic desires. The cape, however, distracts significantly from the heels because it flattens her features out so that she becomes more gender neutral and not quite ideal in the modern sense. But during that time period, it was more popular and ideal for women of the workforce to dress more like men. In the second photograph, from 1968, the miniskirt definitely accentuates the ideal self because it shows more skin, and the tightness of the dress shows the physical shape of the woman. The vertical line down the middle of the dress, however, distracts from the image because psychologically a vertical line shows rigidity and masculinity. It does, however, accentuate the symmetry of flight attendants. This is because it causes the eye to separate down the middle and look at the symmetry of both sides of the woman. The third photograph, from the 1980s, shows a male flight attendant who has broad shoulders, skinny torso, and legs. This is accentuated by the suit coat and tuxedo, which make his shoulders broader. The suit also helps his torso look skinnier than his shoulders. The tight pants make his legs quite skinny. The woman of the right has the ideal form of a woman of that age, which is relatively large bust, small torso, and large hips. This is accentuated by the belt fastened tightly above the waist. The woman on the left, however, shows less of the ideal form, but accentuates other ideal parts of her body, including her legs. She also is wearing heels, accentuated certain parts of her body. The video from 2013 is different because the first man that comes out has an oversized overcoat that accentuates his shoulders to an extreme. It also emphasizes the size of his body. The woman that comes out is almost a reboot of the 1960s uniform because it is one complete dress, but is a little skinnier, tighter, and the proportions are different on her body. Fashion, as reinforcing gender roles, is shown in this progression as evidence. In the image from 1930s, the flight attendant is wearing a skirt that causes her to be differentiated from the male flight attendants. She also wears high heels, which cause her to be different than the male attendants. In 1968, the women are even more obvious because their natural forms are more evident with the tight dress that reveals more of the shape of the body. In the 1980s, however, the women look a little more like men with their formal suits. But there are things that distinguish them from men. The skirt worn by the lady in the left obviously shows that she is a woman because she is revealing her legs. The woman on the right has a belt that pronounces her femininity. The male in the middle has a suit that accentuates the features that are generally accepted as male. In the 2013 uniform video, the woman is becoming more pronounced as a woman, and the man is reinforced as a man. The woman has a short dress that fits tightly on her body, thus accentuated what makes her female, and she also shows more skin, which sadly is generally accepted as normal for women who dress formal. The men, on the other hand, have more clothing, and the clothing is bigger than most would expect.